beans. So the first question is, do I go canned or do I go dry? And I say do what you want to do. If you don't do beans very often, buy a can of beans. I keep a couple cans of beans in my car just in case. Dried beans. If you eat a lot of beans or if you want to make a lot of beans, this is probably the way to go. Once they're fully hydrated, they're gonna increase by weight 2.5 times. So if you start out with 200 grams of beans, you're gonna end up with 500 grams of beans. It works almost the same way with volumetric measurements. If you start out with a cup of beans, you're gonna end up with about 2.5 cups of beans, but there's a lot of air in between. So volume doesn't really mean a lot here. So for the sake of argument, we'll just say that this can of beans was $1. They tend to range in price from like 70 cents to 150, depending on the brand that you're buying. Sometimes you're paying for better farming practices. Sometimes you are actually just paying for better quality. And I think that this can was 15 ounces, which is just short of a pound, and these were sold to me in bulk by the pound, just over $2 a pound. Just right there we have $1 a pound and $2 a pound, except that these are already made. So remember I said that these are going to increase by weight by 2.5 times. So now you have a little better value over here. If I soak a pound of beans, I'm going to get 2.5 pounds rather than the 15 ounces for $1 over here. I'll have 2.5 pounds for $2. But it doesn't stop there. They tend to measure the water content in the can, which is where a lot of the real weight is. So you have 15 ounces of beans and water, and here you have the full weight of beans, and you're gonna get whatever water you put in there. Let's check it out. Let's check out what the actual value of a can of beans is. All right, let's stay with our imperial units of measurement just for math's sake. 7.6 ounces. So just over half of that weight in that can was beans. 7.66 divided by 2.5. So I want to get 3.06 ounces of beans in this bad boy here. And I am working with different beans. I'm doing pinto beans because I'm gonna work with them over the next few episodes. And I had a can of black beans in my car. So that's what we get because there's a snowstorm outside and I'm not going anywhere. And that's what we have, how many beans we have in one can of beans. So rough math gets me to, if this cost me $1, this cost me somewhere around 35 cents. So get the can if you want to. $1 isn't really a lot of money for an ingredient you're gonna use once in a while, but if you make beans often or want to make a lot of beans, the dried is definitely where it's at. All right, let's make some beans. There are a couple schools of thought on this. We can just put them in a pot and let them go all day. We will need to keep the water coming and keep them just full enough of water. If you're gonna be away for any length of time, I recommend a crock pot. Now, I don't have a crock because my crock broke, but luckily for me, I'm a bean soaker, and it takes exactly as much time, but there's no heat involved for all but the last hour and a half. And it depends on what kind of bean you get as well. Black beans don't take as long as pinto beans, don't take as long as garbanzo beans. I'm working on a comprehensive bean soaking and simmering list. When I have that done, I'll probably put it up over here. So now I have a cup of beans, or 7 ounces, or 200 grams. So this is gonna make me about 500 grams of beans, or 18 ounces of beans. And if you get beans from dry, you need to clean them, because once in a while you will find something that you don't want to eat, like a stone. It doesn't happen every time, and in fact, I think it's only happened to me about 3 times in the last 10 to 12 years, but it does happen. Checking your beans is definitely less expensive than a dentist bill, but you're also checking for other stuff. There could be twigs in here, there could be broken beans. You don't have to take the broken beans out. They can be a sign of neglect, and they can also be a place where kind of dirt builds up, where we can't really rinse our beans clean. When the dirt gets in these little crevices. You want to take out any that are very discolored. You want to take any out that are not the kind of beans that you want. I'm pretty sure that that is a cannellini bean, or maybe a very small white northern bean. A lot of these things get processed in the same facilities. I like doing them in a pan because I can usually get them all in a single layer, and then I can sort of saute to get a different viewpoint on them. And there I've got a couple broken ones. Nothing too disturbing. Let's go one more. And once you're satisfied, I'm just going to run my fingers through them one more time. And there we go. We just cleaned a cup of beans. And in my discards, I have one very discolored bean, one very shriveled bean, a few cracked beans, and then one bean that's not a pinto. I'm gonna give these a rinse, get any dirt and debris off of the beans, and then I'm gonna cover them with at least 3 times as much water, giving them enough room to grow. And pintos are going to soak for 6 to 8 hours. It's also a good idea to soak your beans in a bowl or something that's a little bit wider. And I've made the mistake before of soaking them in a mason jar, and as well as moving up, they also try to move side to side, so while your beans get stuck, There we go. And if there are any floaters that don't sink to the bottom after a reasonable amount of time, a couple seconds, I usually pick those out too. That can be a sign of insect damage, or it can just be a difference in density. You can also feel free to make a lot more. These freeze really well once they're done. I'm just really in the habit of making a cup of beans every week and incorporating it into my meals throughout the week. All right, you see how these are nice and plump now? That's just what we want. These have been soaking for about 7.5 hours. Let's get them out of that water. So we discard the water that they're soaking in because beans have a sugar that humans can't digest. We're gonna throw away any beans that seem to not be hydrated after that. And that sugar is what makes beans so musical. Now, in addition to hydrating these beans and making them have a shorter cook time than if we were just to cook them from dry, water gets out all of those indigestible sugars and they end up in the water right here. So let's dump this, let's rinse the beans, then they go in the pot. I probably have about this much water already in there. That's just shy of a liter, or maybe around 4 cups. I'm gonna cover these, turn it on high. When it comes to a boil, I'm gonna cock the lid so it doesn't boil over and turn the heat all the way down to low. I'll let you know how long that takes. You're going to be doing some stirring, so I recommend getting a spoon and a plate on which you can rest the spoon. I'm going to give these a stir. Cover them with a cocked lid, and I want to turn this down until I can just barely see the flame. And I'm gonna let those go. Pintos need about 90 minutes at this point. I'm gonna check them at about 75. It'll give me plenty of time to do my salting. With regard to adding anything to the pot, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It depends on what my goals are. A quartered onion and some garlic is very nice. I've also added a whole or a halved jalapeno, depending on how much flavor I'm trying to get in there. But beans do have their own flavor profile, and I can always season them later, which is a great thing because I really enjoy pinto beans with just salt most of the time. And that's the way Grandma used to make them, because we would eat them with other things as well. A lot of people suggest salting them halfway through, so at the 45-minute mark, giving them some salt. You definitely don't want to salt them right away, definitely not at this stage. It will make them a little tough. The main reason I like to wait for the last 10 to 15 minutes to salt is that all the water that is going to reduce is pretty much reduced. And you can never take salt out, but you can always put more salt in. So for instance, in addition to the beans becoming tough, if I got it salty enough to taste right now, it hasn't had a chance to reduce. So when it reduces, it's going to get saltier because all that salt is going to stay in the water and some of the water is going to reduce. So I like to wait. I'll be back in about 20 minutes to stir the beans. I've got some snow to shovel. These beans have been on for about 45 minutes. They look ready, but when you try to open it, it's still all kind of splintered and fragmented. That's definitely not ready yet. I've got about 15 minutes to go. Let's just check them. I'm gonna do a couple of things. There's a little too much water left in here for what I want to do. So before I season, I'm just gonna remove some of it. And I'll hold on to that until I know that I don't need it anymore. I do particularly like the bean water, especially after it's been sitting in the fridge for 3 or 4 days and it gets a little bit creamy. I really like that texture. So I'm gonna leave a good amount in. And that was maybe a tablespoon. Stir that in. And that's plenty salty. That was about a tablespoon of kosher salt. I'm gonna season it again at the end, depending on where it's at, how much of the salt the beans have absorbed. But for right now, especially after I just seasoned it, it's really kind of just the water that's seasoned. All right, these have gone about 90 minutes. Let's test the doneness. Let's give one a taste here. No, just a few more minutes. That's a done bean. So what am I gonna make with just a pot of beans? Now I have this ingredient. What can I make that's not gonna take another 90 minutes? Well, give me an egg and I'll build you an empire. All right, medium heat. A little bit of avocado oil. Maybe about a 1/4 tablespoon of butter. The butter's for flavor. The oil so that it doesn't burn. Yeah. And then over here, I'm gonna turn this pan on a medium high, get it nice and hot. I want a tortilla with this. I'm gonna flip my egg, turn my heat off, and just let the residual heat finish off the rest of that egg white. Salt my egg, pepper my egg, a little bit of salsa, now if I'm gonna make a taco or a burrito, I want this as pliable as possible. I'm gonna tear this up and use it kind of like edible spoons, so I do want it a little bit crispy. There we go, there's my bean breakfast. Little egg, little salsa, doesn't have to be complicated. Perfect. This is exactly what I want. So this is a decent amount of time. This is a decent kind of time commitment, but it's mostly unattended time. And I was able to do the majority of that time while I slept, and then also while I got ready for work and shoveled the snow that I needed to shovel. There's really nothing like a pot of homemade beans. It might just be my food memories, but I think that it's just a very comforting thing, a very simple thing, and you can put it together with other very simple things and it makes something very satisfying. I do tend to do it on my day off, and I do tend to make enough beans for the week. You can make enough beans for a couple of weeks and portion them off and put them in the freezer. With these beans here, I'm probably going to cover them in cling wrap and put them out in the porch. It's about 0 degrees Fahrenheit or about -18 Celsius here in St. Paul. You never want to put something that's come right off the stove right into the oven. You always want to make sure that it's room temperature or less, so that you don't bring up the temperature of your entire refrigerator. If this were summertime, I might leave it on a windowsill. I might even get a cold pack or two around it to bring it down to temperature. There are also cold packs that are meant to be food safe that you freeze water inside of and then stick inside your food. That's supposed to bring the temperature down, and I've seen professional kitchens use those a lot. I have a porch that I'm not particularly worried about heating up, so that's what I'll do right now. Cheers, get in the kitchen, make yourself something awesome. Don't forget to let your hunger be your inspiration.